The bells of St. Peter's Basilica rang in solemn rhythm, echoing through the ancient corridors of the Vatican, like whispers of divine history. It was only the 5th day since Pope Leo XIV ascended to the throne of St. Peter. A momentous event not just for the Catholic Church, but for the entire world. For the first time in history, an American had been chosen as the Supreme Pontiff. And though the marble walls bore witness to centuries of papal traditions, nothing could prepare them for what was about to unfold. At dawn, the new pope sat alone in the Vatican chapel. Rays of morning light poured through the stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic halos upon his worn cassock. His robe, simple and threadbare, was starkly out of place amid the gilded relics and golden altar. Yet that was exactly who he was, a man of the people, shaped not by luxury but by poverty, forged in the barrios of Peru, where he had spent decades washing the wounds of the forgotten. Now, with the weight of spiritual leadership resting on his shoulders, he knelt in silence, praying not for power but for clarity. A soft knock echoed in the stillness. A Vatican aide stepped inside, bowing nervously. "Your Holiness," he said, "President Trump is en route. He has requested a private audience." The Pope's eyes opened slowly. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, but it was gone as quickly as it had come. Without protocol, he asked, "Yes, Your Holiness. No diplomatic prearrangements. He wishes to congratulate you personally."
This book is your beginner's guide to understanding Scripture. Find peace, build relationships, and discover purpose in today's world. Ready to decode the Bible? Find Bible Decoded available on Amazon now.
The Pope rose, his face serene but firm. "Then let us prepare. But we will do so under my terms." His voice, while gentle, carried steel beneath its calm surface. "When he arrives, inform him there will be specific protocols he must follow. This meeting will not be a spectacle." Meanwhile, aboard Air Force One, President Donald Trump reclined in his chair, thumbing through a dossier on the new pope. Former mathematics prodigy. Gave it all up to live in South America. Interesting guy, he muttered. His advisors were less enthused. "Sir," his chief of staff said, adjusting his tie anxiously, "the Vatican has sent several reminders about protocol. This isn't the usual visit." Trump glanced up with a smile. "Since when have I followed protocol? I'm not going there for a ceremony, I'm going to congratulate the first American pope. And I'll do it my way." As the plane descended over the Italian coast, news outlets across the globe erupted in a media frenzy. "Trump heads to Vatican without protocols," screamed headlines. "Clash of Titans," speculated pundits. The narrative was being written before the encounter even began. On the ground, the Vatican was bracing for impact. Inside, red-robed cardinals argued in hushed tones. "He cannot just walk into the Vatican like it's a business meeting," one exclaimed. "There are centuries of tradition to consider. If this content blesses you and you'd like to support our mission, you can buy me a coffee or give a super thanks. Every contribution helps us create more content to inspire and uplift others." But Pope Leo XI remained unshaken. In his study, he watched as global news channels stirred the pot of controversy. "Clash of Americans?" He read aloud with a wry smile. "Let them write what they want. The truth will reveal itself soon enough." When President Trump's motorcade pulled into Vatican City, the world's cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail. The Swiss guards stood rigid, their halberds gleaming in the Roman sun. Trump, ever confident, stepped from the vehicle, flanked by aides, dressed immaculately in a navy blue suit. A Vatican official greeted him. "Mr. President," he said respectfully, "His Holiness requests that traditional Vatican protocols be observed." "I know how to show respect," Trump replied calmly. "But I'm not here for theater. I'm here for truth." The grand doors of the Vatican opened, and Trump strode through the halls like a man born to command. At the end of the long corridor, Pope Leo XI waited in silence, seated on a modest wooden chair. His face was unreadable, his hands folded in his lap. As Trump approached, he extended his hand in greeting, offering a firm smile. "Your Holiness," he said. "Congratulations." And then, the moment that would define the day occurred. Pope Leo XI did not rise. He did not smile. He did not extend his hand. His fingers remained interlocked, his eyes locked onto Trump's with unwavering intensity. For a breathless 3 seconds, time seemed to stop. The president's hand hung suspended mid-air, unanswered. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Cameras flashed. The tension was unbearable. But then, Pope Leo spoke. "Mr. President," he said, "welcome to the Vatican."
Feeling anxious or disconnected? Ready for a deeper faith journey designed just for you? Discover Bible Study for Black Women. This guide nurtures faith, strength, and growth week by week. Overcome fear and connect with God. This empowering journey is waiting. Find Bible Study for Black Women on Amazon today and start building unshakable faith.
Still, he made no move to shake hands. Trump lowered his arm slowly, a flicker of confusion flashing across his usually unshakable expression. Advisors on both sides scrambled internally to interpret the moment. A Vatican aide stepped forward in alarm, whispering urgently, "Your Holiness, this may be viewed as a grave diplomatic insult." But the Pope ignored him. Instead, he stood slowly and motioned toward a side chamber. "Before we speak as leaders," he said, "I'd like you to join me in something far older than either of our countries." Trump followed as cameras rolled, capturing every uncertain step. In the room stood a wooden basin of water and 2 white towels. In the Gospel of John, Pope Leo explained, "Christ washed the feet of his disciples not out of weakness, but to teach that leadership begins with humility." Trump's advisors were stunned. "Mr. President," his aide whispered, "we should decline. This isn't standard." But Trump held up a hand to silence him. "I'll hear him out." Pope Leo removed his cape and rolled up his sleeves. "I refused your handshake not out of disrespect," he said, "but because this moment calls for something more sacred than symbolism. Will you wash your hands with me?" Trump looked at him, this man who had just challenged the norms of global diplomacy in front of the entire world, and nodded. "I understand." As they approached the basin, Trump poured water first, allowing the Pope to dip his hands. He then took the towel and dried the Pope's hands gently. The Pope returned the act. It was a ritual no one in modern history had seen: a president and a pope washing each other's hands as equals. Not politicians, not diplomats, but 2 men of faith seeking to model servant leadership. The press was stunned. The original story they had come to capture had crumbled before their eyes. This was no power struggle. This was transformation. Later, seated in private, their conversation deepened. "That wasn't what I expected," Trump admitted. "Nor what the world expected," Pope Leo said, "which is precisely why it was necessary." Their dialogue, unknowingly transmitted by an open mic, was being picked up in the adjacent press room. "Faith," the Pope continued, "should guide how we lead, not be used to decorate politics." "I thought you were rejecting me," Trump said. "Instead, you gave me something more." "I chose purpose over protocol," Pope Leo responded. "As I believe you would too, if given the chance." The press room was now silent, every journalist fixated on the broadcast. "You're not what I imagined," Trump admitted. "Nor are you," the Pope replied with a gentle smile. "Which is why we're here. To remind the world that conviction and compassion are not opposites, they are siblings born of the same truth." By the time the press was allowed back into the room, their questions had changed. "Was the handshake refusal a political snub?" one reporter asked. "No," Pope Leo replied, "it was an invitation to something deeper. A reminder that the world doesn't need more ceremonies, it needs more substance." "Mr. President," another asked, "were you offended?" "Not in the slightest," Trump replied. In fact, it was one of the most meaningful greetings I've ever received. The room fell quiet as the Pope turned to Trump and placed a hand on his shoulder. In a world where faith is mocked and power is worshipped, I found strength in a leader unafraid to let faith guide his actions. Trump was visibly moved. And I found wisdom in a leader unafraid to break tradition for the sake of truth. Their meeting had ended the way few expected, with reverence, not rhetoric. Pope Leo presented Trump with a simple olive wood rosary from Jerusalem. A reminder, he said, that prayer should always precede decisions. As the president departed, the symbolism of what had happened began to take hold around the world. Images of the hand-washing ceremony flooded news channels and social media timelines. Commentators were silenced. Critics were confused. Believers were moved. And deep in the Vatican, Pope Leo looked out over the city from his private chapel. Christ never asked us to be popular. He whispered. He asked us to be faithful. And so, the first American pope showed the world what faith looks like when it stands shoulder to shoulder with power and chooses humility. If you were moved by this story, tell us how it impacted you in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of what truly matters. May God bless you, and may we all remember, true leadership begins with service. Across the globe, reactions to the unprecedented meeting surged like tidal waves. In homes, churches, and public forums, people watched the footage of a president and a pope sharing a moment of humility that no one had anticipated. Social media lit up with commentary from every corner of the political and spiritual spectrum. Hashtags like #handwashoffaith, #Pope and President, and #True Leadership began trending within hours. Where many had expected a clash of egos, the world witnessed a collision of values ending not in conflict, but in communion. Back in the United States, analysts on every major network scrambled to revise their commentary. What was originally billed as a potential diplomatic embarrassment transformed into a profound moment of spiritual awakening. Pundits who had dismissed the new pope as inexperienced or overly idealistic now praised his courage. Even critics of President Trump began to acknowledge the sincerity in his participation. One segment on a major American news network showed a pastor from Alabama speaking with tears in his eyes. For years, I've prayed for our leaders to find common ground through Christ. Today, I saw a prayer answered. That was not a photo op. That was God moving through two powerful men. Meanwhile, in Europe, theologians and scholars debated the meaning of the event. Some said the hand-washing recalled the church's earliest days, when leadership was defined by humility and spiritual sacrifice. Others called it a prophetic act, an indictment of the vanity that had seeped into both politics and religion. At a small parish in Lima, Peru, an elderly woman watched the broadcast on a flickering television. She recognized the man in white robes. He had once washed her husband's wounds after a mining accident. Refusing praise, saying only, "We serve God when we serve others." Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "He has not changed. Even now, he serves." At the Vatican, Pope Leo sat with Cardinal Dominguez in quiet reflection. "You risked everything," the cardinal said, still visibly shaken from the day's events. The Pope nodded. "I did. But how else could I teach what Christ taught?" Many are calling it the most shocking gesture of any papacy in living memory. Then perhaps the world needed to be shocked. Pope Leo replied. The church was not built on applause. It was built on sacrifice. Dominguez folded his hands. And Trump, did you expect him to respond the way he did? The Pope's eyes softened. I expected resistance. I found reverence. God works in unexpected ways. At the White House, Trump returned to a flurry of activity and press briefings, but something about him had shifted. Advisors noticed a new stillness. A calm that had replaced the usual urgency. That night, instead of dining with political allies, he walked alone in the Rose Garden, holding the olive wood rosary. In an off-camera moment later that week, he confided to a journalist, "I've met kings, billionaires, generals. But I've never felt what I felt in that room with Pope Leo. Not judgment. not competition. Just a mirror. And I had to ask myself what kind of leader I want to be remembered as. The ripple effects of the meeting began to take shape quickly. Charitable donations to faith-based organizations spiked. Clergy across denominations used their next sermons to talk about service over ceremony. Young people, so often disconnected from religious tradition, shared clips of the hand-washing moment on TikTok, saying things like, "This is what real leadership looks like." And while some political commentators continued to critique, calling it a staged spectacle or accusing both men of manipulating public perception, their voices were increasingly drowned out by the awe spreading across congregations and communities. The hand-washing scene became a symbol replayed at Catholic masses, evangelical conferences, and even leadership retreats. Educators and motivational speakers began referencing it as a parable for the modern age. Humility is not a weakness. It's the source of lasting power. Back in Rome, a mural was quietly commissioned in a small alleyway near the Vatican, a striking painting of a pope and president kneeling over a basin of water, their hands outstretched, the towel between them like a bridge. No names, no titles. Just the image. Above it, a simple inscription in Latin, caducit, servant. He who leads, serves. Weeks passed. Seasons began to change. But the conversation sparked by that meeting did not fade. Schools debated the meaning of leadership. Faith communities found renewed purpose. And in private, leaders around the world began rethinking what it meant to carry authority. One afternoon, Pope Leo XI returned to the chapel where he had prayed alone before the Trump meeting. This time, he was not alone. Trump entered quietly, without an entourage. No cameras. No speeches. Just two men who had walked through controversy and emerged with respect. They sat side by side in the same pew, gazing at the crucifix. The silence stretched comfortably. "It's strange," Trump finally said, "how something so simple could turn into something so big." "Truth often hides in simplicity," the Pope replied. "Just as God hides in the quietest hearts." Trump nodded. "You made me think in a way I haven't in years. I've built towers, won elections, made deals. But that one moment, washing hands in silence, it felt eternal. Because eternity is touched when pride falls away," Pope Leo whispered. "When power bows to purpose." A final press conference was held a month later, where a Vatican spokesperson read a prepared statement on behalf of the Holy Father. It read, "We live in an age that values volume over virtue. Our task as leaders, be it spiritual or political, is not to echo the noise of the world, but to reflect the stillness of God's truth." The world watched two leaders that day. They expected conflict. They saw communion. May that become the new model for how we lead, how we serve, and how we love. That statement was reprinted in over 80 languages. It was quoted in sermons, political speeches, and even appeared etched into the wall of a chapel built in rural Kenya, where a missionary priest said, "This story reminded us all why we follow Christ. Not for ceremony. For service." And though many would return to politics as usual, some didn't. Some found the story impossible to forget. A young man in Texas left a corporate job to work with refugees. A former diplomat in Paris began volunteering weekly at a homeless shelter. A high school in Manila rewrote its leadership curriculum to include a lesson called "The Basin and the Towel." Even a Hollywood producer began work on a film script, tentatively titled "The Day the Hand Wasn't Shaken," to bring the story to a wider audience. But Pope Leo XI didn't seek acclaim. He continued his quiet work, visiting hospitals, encouraging youth, and writing encyclicals about the forgotten power of humility. And Trump, though rarely vocal about faith in public, was often seen with the olivewood rosary tucked in his coat pocket, silent, symbolic, enduring. As the world spun on, the memory of that moment endured. A refusal that was not a rejection. A silence that thundered louder than speeches. A basin of water that baptized not with ritual, but with revelation. And if you're watching this today, perhaps you, too, have felt the stirring. The reminder that greatness isn't found in how loudly we speak, but in how deeply we serve. Before you click away, take one moment to reflect: who could you serve today? What gesture, however small, could become your basin of water? Because somewhere, in the quiet corners of the world, another soul may be waiting not for applause, but for grace. And so, as we close this story, may it not be an ending, but a beginning. If this video moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of something eternal, please share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, where we share stories of faith, redemption, and truth every week. And most importantly, carry this message with you. True leadership is not in how many hands we shake, but in how many hearts we touch. God bless you. God bless America. And may God bless all those who lead with courage and serve with humility. If this content blesses you and you'd like to support our mission, you can buy me a coffee or give a super thanks. Every contribution helps us create more content to inspire and uplift others.